Welcome to episode 7 of the Golden Hour. I'm Sean Sullivan. Happy holidays from all of us here at Horizon League headquarters. This week's episode features Brian Schroeder, the CEO and founder of Preventia. We hope you enjoy this week's episode in and around mental wellness. Enjoy. Hi, friends. Welcome to the Golden Hour. We're at episode 7 of our new content series at the Horizon League. I'm Sean Sullivan, and it is my great pleasure to be joined today by the Preventia CEO and founder, Brian Schroeder. Great to have you.
Thanks for having me.
So we're going to get into a little mental wellness talk. But before we do that, there's a general feel of what mental wellness is. There's a general feel of that mental health is becoming top of mind for folks. We're going to maybe dispel some myths, maybe provide some clarity around those terms. But before we get into that, maybe you could share your why around Preventia and how your path formed that.
Yeah, first of all, thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure to partner with Horizon League over the last, has it been a year now that we've been talking?
At least.
Seems like a long time. My personal story for this, again, I'm Brian Schroeder, and I founded this company, Preventia, back in 2017, actually. But before that, I was in healthcare for, probably about 20 years. And I did a lot of things in healthcare. Mostly I ran hospital-based practices, OBGYN practices, labor and delivery units. I was at pediatric cardiology at Riley Hospital for a little while. But then I got into wellness kind of by happenstance, going and getting a cup of coffee one day, and I saw someone I used to work with that was at the Starbucks that was at Eskenazi Health. And I saw her and approached her just to say hello. And before I knew it, I was working in wellness. But there was a reason for that, that transition. Back in 2013, my wife, Amy, was diagnosed with cardiomyopathy, which is heart failure to those that don't know. And that was after she gave birth to my daughter, Isabel, and it was very scary. So her ejection fraction, her heart was pumping at about 15%. And for a normal human, that is 55 to 60% at least. So I watched her struggle to figure out what to do. You know, the doctor was there to diagnose and treat her, but she really needed to make some major changes in her lifestyle. So that was her habit, behavior, her mindset, the way she thought about her condition, how she was going to cope with it, deal with it, get past it. And actually last year, she was, for the first time ever, her doctor told her she no longer has heart failure. And I often leave that part of the story out, but when I was going through all of this, I had a newborn daughter. I've been working in healthcare, which I would call sick care, for a really long time. And when I was presented with this opportunity, it just aligned with everything that was going on in my life at the time. So I had this chance to get into wellness, and I did. And that started me down the path. Now, Preventia, the genesis for Preventia was a little different in that I became very frustrated working in big healthcare that wellness, while it was prioritized, wasn't easily scalable. There's a lot of cool technology around wellness, and we could get into that all day. That's a whole other podcast. But I became frustrated because I saw that the work that we were doing was working. It was just not touching enough people. And so that's why I started Preventia, to really find a way to scale it up and touch as many people as possible.
Wow. Well, thanks for sharing Amy's story and your family story there. And I'm glad the why led you to create Preventia, because it's doing important work. And maybe because you kind of hit that term sick care versus healthcare, can we maybe pop into the preventative versus reactive space?
Yes.
And why that's so critical, and what are some of the areas that, our audience is a lot of folks, right? We could be talking to student athletes who are listening, to college athletics administrators. It could be the Indianapolis sports business community, and just families and friends of all those stakeholders. But what is it about, and why are we maybe as a society missing out on the healthcare, and why are we kind of reliant on sick care?
Yeah, it's really I would reframe it as it's sick care versus well care.
Okay.
We live in a sick care system, and one of the most interesting things that I learned when I was working in sick care, I had a COO at the time who said to me, as I was building out these wellness programs really at Eskenazi Health. He said to me, and he wasn't referring to Eskenazi, just generalizing, that not everybody is rooting for you. Just remember that as you're building your wellness program, not everybody is rooting for you in healthcare because there's a lot of revenue tied to chemo. There's a lot of revenue tied to cardiology, to all of these sick care sort of conditions that generate really the business model for being in healthcare. And so as you keep people out of the sick care system, they're not generating that revenue. So that was very interesting to me. It's not like we didn't know that at some capacity, but to actually hear, keep in mind, not everybody is cheering for you and rooting you on. Not everybody wants you to succeed, and that always stuck with me. It really, really did. If you think about just day to day, what this means, the differentiator between preventive care and a more reactive form of care would be, wouldn't it be nice to not end up in the doctor's office at all? Once you get to the doctor's office, they're going to diagnose and treat you. They're going to look at what's going on with you now. And people don't know this, but most physicians, they really want you to be well. They get incredibly frustrated when you come back a year later and you're cardiometabolic and now co-prevalent, whereas before maybe you only had prediabetes and maybe you were suffering from anxiety or whatever that was. Wouldn't it be nice if you could work with someone like a health coach or a nutritionist or whoever that person might be that focuses on preventive care so you don't end up there in the first place? The impact of this, it's not really, we think about the hospitals and the costs associated with like going to the doctor and their revenue, but for the self-funded employer that's out there that's absorbing the cost of these increasing costs tied to these chronic conditions or mental health, they are extremely impacted by this. So interchangeably, I see a lot people say, well, we don't really need health coaching or we don't need this type of solution because we have an on-site near-site clinic or we do wellness visits every year. Again, those are clinical. These are doctors. So or in mental health, oftentimes it's therapy or it's counseling. It's reacting once someone presents, and we want to keep people from presenting. Student population has been very interesting to me because, they're learning how to live on their own for the first time, especially when they're freshmen. They're adjusting to life on campus, and you're seeing campuses across the country with 6 to 8 week waiting lists minimum to get in to see a counselor. Well, the reason for that is that they're 80% of the kids they probably don't need to see, but they're seeing them all. The ones that they need to see, they can't get to. And it's because we have really they too are set up for this kind of sick care type of environment. We need to do better. We need to get ahead of it much better than we do.
Thank you for sharing that. So let's pivot maybe a little bit to that intersection of performance with athletes in this case, and the wellness piece. So you've got kind of this performance. How do we optimize athletes for performance? But they've got perhaps the wellness piece. How do those two intersect as you see it, and how does Preventia create the pathway toward maybe staving off the triage, if you will?
Yeah, athletes is it's been really interesting for me because this is new for me. I'm not going to pretend to be an expert in athletics, but it's been really interesting for me to learn that when you're in big healthcare and you think about population health, that term gets thrown around a lot, but really at its core, what it means is you have a defined population that exists within a community that may be at high risk, rising risk, or some form of risk versus another, cohort from the community. When you look at a college campus, you've got the same thing. You've got this micro population there that functions as its own community. And within that community, you have first-year students. You have, first-gen students. You might have Greek life. You've got athletics, all of which I consider to be an at-risk or a high-risk population. Athletes that come onto campus are expected to transition as a human, to transition into living on your own for the first time, but they also have all this pressure on them that the rest of the population really doesn't have, whether it's rehabbing from an injury, getting into the mindset that you need to be to function as an elite athlete, to enhance your performance, to make sure that you're not slipping, on your grades or your relationships or whatever that might be. We don't want the athlete to present to counseling with all of these problems, you know, only a few months into school. What's going to happen? They're not going to perform at the level that they are expected to perform. And unfortunately, the infrastructure that I'm seeing across the globe, in the United States at least, is that campuses aren't really set up to deal with that. Now, performance psychology, I don't know a ton about it. I know some great performance psychologists that work with athletes on these types of things. But wouldn't it be nice to have more than one or two on campus, with the students that can actually, again, this goes back to scalability. There's never enough of those types of providers that exist within these micro communities to manage it effectively and scale it up. You can't meet people where they are if you only have two or three people addressing the concern. And the campus counseling centers, they're going to react to the problem once it presents, but they're not going to get ahead of it as well as maybe the athletes need them to, or the other at-risk populations that are on campus.
So maybe a good segue, and you touched on a couple of them, but we know that the athletic population has these rigorous schedules.
Yeah.
They're, especially those first years, are dealing with some of the things you just noted. What are some of the most overlooked areas that higher ed institutions or athletic departments are facing, and what are you seeing is being missed in that space that could be implemented either scalable wise or otherwise?
I think it's really in the spirit of what I was just referring to. From what I've learned, a lot of campuses like to own their own initiatives. They want to make sure that student athletes are supported on campus, that they have enough counselors and therapists, or maybe some digital tools that will help, create that ability to connect with some sort of therapist or counseling person. I think what's missing is there's a lot of great campuses out there that preach wellness, and they talk about holistic wellness, and it seems like every one of them has their own number of dimensions of wellness, whether that's social and emotional and physical and mental or whatever it might be. Academic sometimes is a part of their wheel. Really integrating that with an intentional mindset that we can't just bring in a solution to augment what we're doing in counseling and just add more counseling. Because again, we're just reacting to the problem. We have got to challenge campuses to keep kids out of the counseling center in the first place. We want them to be able to get there when it's time. There's a university that we met with a couple weeks ago, and I'm not going to call them out because this is happening everywhere, but they had 14 student suicides last year, and that can't happen. This is part of the problem. We cannot get to these kids. We cannot tell any child. I have an 11-year-old daughter. I think about her going to school, in just 6-7 years from now. And we can't tell these kids that, hey, we can't see you right now because you're contemplating suicide, and we have too long of a wait list. If we could just, and you, in the meantime, you have these counseling centers telling you, we don't need to see them. We don't need to see 80% of them. So if we don't need to see 80% of them, and we're augmenting service lines with other clinical service lines, that's not really necessarily going to help either. So we have to look at this through a lens of wellness. We have to look at it through a lens of well-being and being more proactive. How would it look, I guess, to have a student, imagine being a student and you present as a student athlete even, your very first year on campus, you're going through orientation and you learn that part of what you're going to experience as a student on that campus is you're going to meet with a health coach every month during your first year. You're going to check in with them every month. They're going to make sure that you're up on your habits and your behaviors, and that you're in the right mindset and that you're managing that. You're managing to that transition the way that you maybe need to, so you don't end up in the counseling center. So that would be the thing. That's the biggest thing for me that I'm seeing across most universities, is we're not thinking about how to be proactive enough.
Well, that gives me a little reflection. I mean, I can recall as an athlete in my freshman year going to college and feeling totally overwhelmed. And just hearing you talk about the term coaching provides relief, even though that was a long
Yeah.
time ago. Like
Yeah.
that idea that it almost makes me think about. I have kids as well, Brian, as you know, and we go to PE. You know, we train our minds for math. We train the minds for science, whatever it might be. How do we train the mind for resiliency? And
Yeah.
to me, that seems at the heart of maybe the coaching piece that you and your team are working on. Can you give us a little bit more on coaching and why that can perhaps help solve the need to when it's out of hand?
Yes, absolutely. You know, the resilience is one of the key aspects to health coaching. To break it down, though, and just keep it really simple when it comes to coaching versus therapy or coaching versus counseling, a good analogy for this, it's not necessarily an analogy, but just a side story, is so let's think about my wife again, Amy. When she was diagnosed with cardiomyopathy, she didn't stop seeing her doctor. She kept going to see her doctor. Her doctor was there to diagnose and treat her. The coach became the person that was there to help Amy execute on the plan. So, doc says, you have heart disease. You need to eat healthier, move more, stress less. Here's a pamphlet. Coach says, throw the pamphlet out. We're going to get down to you. We're going to acknowledge the fact that you're in this situation, and we're going to work with you on tapping into intrinsic motivators, using motivational interviewing types of techniques that really meet you where you are, address your, there's different stages of change for people, your readiness for change, and work with you based on where you are to help you execute on that plan. It's very future looking. It's helping. It's really about moving forward and not looking back. Even on the mental health side, you know, if you're going to see a therapist, it's about looking at past trauma and saying, okay, based on what's happened to you, here's where we go from here. This is more based on what we need to do to motivate you and focus on your habits and behavior and well-being. How do we help you execute on that plan? And really, that requires a relationship. People forget about that. You have to build a relationship with someone over time, a real human. It's not going to be accomplished through AI. It's not going to be accomplished through a lot of these wellness platforms that do challenges and incentives. Those are cool things to incorporate, and maybe they motivate people extrinsically. But you have to have the opportunity to build a relationship with another person, and that person is going to walk alongside you for that entire journey. And that doesn't always happen in other aspects of care. You see your doctor, maybe once a year, a couple times a year. They're expensive. So, that's one of the biggest differentiators.
I'm going a little bit off script now because I'm so intrigued about that.
Fire away.
That coaching element, right? Because we've both talked about family. I mean, my kids come home. They range from, really young to first year in high school, right? And the layers of emotions or quote unquote issues they deal with school or with sports or with their friends or whatever the conflict might be. I'm always thinking ahead to my experience, which we do as parents, right? Because that's what you
all
parent.
the time.
That's what you parent on. In my going to a therapist and getting kind of going through that look back and how I can use that moving forward. But there was almost like a Bible given to me, like here, and some things that if I do them every day, habitually, it's going to improve how I outlook things.
Yeah.
So why, and this goes to the scalability of Preventia or just any wellness program that is coaching and provides that. Why is our society not doing it younger, in your opinion, as you've had these meetings with whether it's hospitals or organizations, higher ed, school systems?
Yeah.
Why don't we treat it regularly younger?
There's so many ways that I can answer this question, or at least speak to it. This could be a long discussion. I would say that it's, first of all, it's not necessarily fair to say that we don't.
Okay.
I think there's a lot of amazing programs and initiatives that are focused on it. One great one that I've been blessed to serve on the board of advisors in the past for is Jump In for Healthy Kids here in Indianapolis. Julie Burns, CEO there, they've done some amazing work in schools and churches and within the community in general. So there's some amazing programs out there for kids. There's a number of reasons why it becomes difficult, though. When you grow up, and you go to grandma's house, grandma puts out muffins and cake. What are you going to eat? Habits and behaviors, the learned behaviors that you have from previous generations tend to end up impacting you. And people think that diabetes and heart disease is a genetic thing. If your parents had diabetes and their parents had diabetes, you're just going to have diabetes. Well, your parents had certain habits and behaviors that you got from them and they got from their parents, and that flows down to you. So a lot of it is cultural. It's learned behavior. It's breaking that, finding a way to break that, that behavior that you've seen and observed has become part of your life throughout life is very difficult. And that's where coaches really come in to help break that mold and help you start taking baby steps to rethink the way that it's like my wife always thought she was doomed, like she was just doomed. Her parents, they were diabetic, and there's all these, she's had uncles that have, dropped dead before 40 years of age from heart attacks. And she just figured, it's not in the cards for me. I could never be well. It's not about that. Epigenetics has proven that there is another path. The other thing I'll say is anybody that is listening to this today, if you want to see the limitations of underserved populations and how hard it is for them to instill this in their children, go through the United Way poverty simulation sometime. Go connect with United Way, see when their next one is. And this is like a role-playing type of thing that they do where you play the role of an individual child or parent or whatever, just trying to make it in life. And when you see all of the things that people have to do, whether it's social influencers of health or social determinants of health that keep you from being able to just survive, let alone thrive, it's very difficult. And we need as much help as we can possibly get. And sometimes that help might be someone else that you can build that relationship with that can, get you down that path a little further. So, again, loaded question. I hope you can feel the passion behind this answer because there's so many dimensions to it. That's why I used to work with underserved populations so closely. But it's certainly multidimensional.
Well, it wasn't my intent to give you a loaded one, other than I'm curious about your experience, right? And I think it's important. And there are so many tangents, if that's the term we could use, that we could kind of go down. But we have limited time, and I think maybe
please don't mistake the response with anything other than an extreme passion for this work.
No, absolutely not. And I think so stigma is a word we use a lot. Our friends at the Colts are doing really, really good work. Shout out to the Ursay family and Kaylin Jackson over there.
Brett Kramer.
And our former colleague at the Horizon League, Brett Kramer, for all the work that's going on over there to kick the stigma, as they put it. What are the roles of college athletics administrators or athletes, coaches, support staff in our little world? How can we help remove the stigma that can help in this area?
I think what you're doing today is one of the biggest things. The NCAA, a lot of the different conferences out there, just do your best to spread awareness for this. If there's any way to use, and leverage your position within collegiate athletics to be an influencer, to bring awareness to that there are alternative models for this stuff. A lot of times they're less expensive. A lot of times they're a lot more impactful. People don't know about them. Do your best to continue to spread that awareness and that it is okay to not be okay. And that is, I think, a powerful lesson for people to learn. Um, Listen to the students. It's been, if you go into any employer, they talk a lot about listening to the employees, and they're your number one most valuable asset. Well, who are those people at, the universities? Your number one most valuable asset, and everybody knows this, is the students. And I have been so inspired by um, just engaging in the conversations with like the SAC committees that you see at every individual university. We had a mental health summit at Butler University this past January, and we were expecting a couple hundred people to show up, but the SAC committee got involved, and before we knew it, the night of the event, that was at Butler at Hinkle, it was like they just kept flowing in, man. And then and you came, right? You were
Mhm.
there for that event.
Yeah.
So there were like 1,100 people that showed up, and they were almost all students. And most of them, like at least half of them, weren't athletes
Yeah.
because they had started spreading awareness to everybody. And they are wanting this, they are craving this. They don't like to be seen, regardless of what you're told a lot of time by the counseling teams or people on campus. They think that the students want to see people in person, and they don't. Not that they don't at all, but they don't necessarily want to be seen going into
Mhm.
the employee health center or the campus counseling center or whatever. They'd like to be able to do it on their time and terms. But really, I think back to your question, doing your part to spread the awareness. That's why the Colts campaign is so amazing to me. They're not mental health experts at all. They will tell you that straight up. We are not. We are a football team. We're philanthropists, and they have done such an amazing job of partnering with organizations throughout the state of Indiana to really kick the stigma. This could be a global campaign, really, for them, but they've done an amazing job just by creating that awareness.
Good. That's great feedback. You talked about listening to students as one action step and heard. How about other things that folks on campus should be thinking about in general in this space? If it's a student who wants to improve their well-being outside of what they might be getting with an athletic trainer, a summit on campus that we've seen success with your work. What are some of the other things that folks on campus should be thinking about?
Students or
Any you take it however you want.
I think for the students, a lot of times you'll see a new technology come in, maybe, and you can be overwhelmed by a lot of the different stuff that's available to you. And you may not even know that you have these resources available to you all. But as a student, just like the SAC committee, there are a lot of great, student groups out there. There's a lot of peer groups that you can tap into where you can learn more about, what the campus has to offer. A lot of times I'll talk to students, they'll say, yeah, they don't do anything for us here on campus. And I'll be like, did you read and like actually go look? Because you have all this stuff available to
Yeah.
you. And they're like, oh, wow, I didn't even know that I had that. So there's a reason for that, though. There's a reason the students aren't aware of it. We don't want to wait for them to present at the campus counseling center for a visit. We want to get ahead of it. We want to make sure that the wellness programs that are put on place in campus, you can't just build a framework for a wellness program and say, we embrace the 7 dimensions of wellness and blah, 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 and then you create content around it. No, you go out and you shake every student's hand. You get to know every student on campus. You engage with them in person as much as you can. You host events like the summit to create that awareness and make sure that they know that you care about them, that you're there for them, and you don't just preach it, you practice it. And a lot of times you'll see that in wellness programs at employers. You'll see it through community-based programs. The programs are actually there, but nobody knows about them because we create them and then we move on to the next thing. Universities, I've seen how busy. It's been really interesting to me, seriously. Like just getting to know universities, the passion behind helping the students, and then you realize by the time you hand it to someone who already has 12 other things to do that semester, they don't want to own it. They're passionate about it, they love it, but they almost can't own it. They don't have capacity. So how do we do this and also manage to our capacity? One of the ways to do that is to recognize and look yourself in the mirror as a university and say, I can't do all of this myself. I can't just go hire my way out of it. Sometimes you need help. You need to bring someone in who actually does know how to do these things. And I do see that as a common theme. A lot of campuses, they try to tackle the world, man, and they can't do that, at least not well.
Yeah, noble, noble, but like you said, some reality
Yeah,
needs to set in from time to time. Okay,
it's hard work.
you personally, how do you take care of yourself?
Um, well, as an entrepreneur, my life's a lot different. It's a lot different
Yeah,
than it used to be. I used to get up every morning at 5 in the morning. I read a lot of Hal Elrod and Miracle Morning, and I lived to that life. And then not only do we have kids, but I transitioned my career. So as an entrepreneur, most of what I do to be well is mindset. There is a mindset to this type of work, and you can very quickly start to slip. And I've been through therapy. I've done the things that I need to do to react to some issues that I already have. But for me, it's about having perspective in my life and where I want to go. So for me, a lot of it is about being in an entrepreneurial mindset and a mindset of well-being, and knowing that all will be well. Um, Also balance, having balance in my life and making sure that I leave work at work, and that when I'm home, I'm present with my family, and that I don't take any of that for granted whatsoever. I still spend part of my own well being, as I still, at 11 years old, spend at least 5 to 10 minutes with my daughter every single evening talking about her day. We talk about social and emotional intelligence I learned from her, and that helps me be well. I could talk about exercise and all the things that I do around there. It's a part of my life, but the most important things are mindset and making sure that I'm achieving balance just day to day and trying to live a happy life.
those are great. Thank you for sharing. If you miss something along those lines, what is the thing you recognize the most that you didn't do?
If I miss something, what do you mean?
So if you missed a bike ride,
Oh, yeah.
you know what I mean? Like, would that be the biggest?
Yeah.
Like, you could tell at the start of the day or the end of the day, like, that was the thing that I needed today. Like, what's the most impactful for you that, like, I'm not missing this?
Um, I mean, it just comes down to priorities, right? Like, I mean, is it a part of who you are or not? Like, how do you identify? And forgiveness for me is like easy. Like, I miss stuff all the time. That's part of being an entrepreneur. Like, I have to be flexible in my schedule, but I also have to be steady. So I'm as steady as I possibly can be, but I identify as an athlete. I identify as an entrepreneur. We could talk about this all day too, but that goes back to like the book Atomic Habits. It's like, if somebody offers you, you're trying to quit smoking, offers you a cigarette, you say, I don't identify as a smoker. No, it's no thank you, I'm trying to quit. It's no thank you, I'm not a smoker. You might be a smoker trying to quit. So when it comes to athletics or any of my habits, I try to keep that perspective that if I miss something, I still identify as an athlete. I still identify as someone who, you know, gives himself grace and forgiveness for not sticking to the plan. But it's hard to do. Life is busy. As a
Yeah.
student, or as an entrepreneur, whatever it is, life gets in the way, man. You got to be flexible.
I love that you brought up Atomic Habits. There's so much in that
Great book.
read that you can, as a human, just throw it on the shelf and add to your daily units. I think I love just knowing that if I have a 5 or 6 thing routine, that if I hit them, I know it's going to be a great day.
Yeah.
However, the mindset, if I miss one, to give grace and
Yeah.
do it again tomorrow. I think that's such a good point you made.
Stick with the plan.
All right. So, anything else from Preventia that you'd love to share with folks who might be listening? And as we talked about, like, this could be athletes, this could be administrators, this could be families and friends, or folks here in the indie business community. Anything else that you wanted to touch on?
No, I mean, not really. I guess I would just say that in the spirit of the discussion that we've had today, we really have done our best to try to reimagine healthcare and reimagine it in a way that it's not sick care. It's more focused on well care. And how do we do that? Well, we talked about the importance of relationships. If you can think about, you know, the programs that you have on campus and recognize again the spirit of the discussion around You can't do everything yourself. This was built to augment and come alongside what you're doing, whether it's on campus or at an employer or whatever, and help you scale up that behavior change, that proactive care in a way that you may not have thought about before. It's a different type of approach. It's called a coach approach. I would encourage anyone, whether it's Preventia or some other amazing solution that's out there, to really think hard about if you're thinking about and contemplating bringing programs like this on campus, can you do enough of it to actually make an impact and not have it just be another program that nobody knows about and you can check it off a box. So we're trying to take that approach and make it not just a box check, put it into action.
Well, I know I speak for all of us at the league where we say thank you and your team for engaging with us over the last year and a half on a number of discussions, but also presenting to our council, our league
Our pleasure.
presidents, our Student Athlete Advisory Committee in Indianapolis going back several months, providing that thought leadership in this space to those key stakeholders. And I want to echo what you shared to those who might be consuming this, that there are some steps you can take, and why not start with yourself or with your communities and see what can go from there, because there's a long runway of a first domino here. And
That's right.
I hope we can work with you to continue to be advocates for a proactive approach to well care.
Well, it's certainly been a pleasure to work with you, to this point, and really enjoy the awareness that you create, the things that you guys do, just like this podcast. It's taken it, above and beyond where maybe a lot of others go, and it's been a great relationship. Getting to know you guys, you do good work.
Well, we're grateful, Brian. Where can folks find Preventia or yourself, if you'd like to share any of that on social or otherwise?
Yeah, we have social media. We've got an Instagram page. We have a LinkedIn, pretty heavy presence on LinkedIn. Actually, our website is preventia.care. Any of those resources you could go to learn more about Preventia.
Brian Schroeder, CEO and founder of Preventia. We're so grateful to you, and this has been episode 7 of the Golden Hour. So grateful that you could join us this week. Thanks for joining us on episode 7 of the Golden Hour. Hope you enjoyed that discussion with Brian Schroeder, the CEO and founder of Preventia. A lot of great insights there. We hope you advocate in and around this space as well. Well, we are in the midst of winter sports season now in the Horizon League. We've got indoor track and field already underway, swimming and diving continuing, and of course, Horizon League men's and women's basketball going full tilt, not only into league play, but also finishing out some non-league action here around the holidays before we go full force into league action on the hardwood as the calendar turns into 2025. For all the information on the Horizon League, horizonleague.com is your online destination for everything. Also follow us on the socials at Horizon League. We also encourage you to check us out on YouTube. That is youtube.com/Horizon League Network. Okay, happy holidays. Hope you enjoy yours. Wherever you're going, make a major impact.